Hi, my name is Dr. Vida Robertson, and I'm the director of the Center for Critical Race Studies. I'd like to welcome you to our Fall 2020 Symposium. This year's symposium is focused on the most important aspect of our society, the upcoming election and the ability to vote. The fellows of the center are deeply interested in making sure that communities of color, the incredible constituency that makes up the University of Houston downtown, is well informed about the issues that are facing them and about the dynamic circumstances that we face today. Today, we will have an opportunity to share our thoughts with county executives, with candidates and members of the community as we come to a deeper understanding of what voting means in these trying circumstances. In the words of Senator John Lewis, voting is precious. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in our democratic society, and we must use it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce County Clerk Chris Hollins, who will give us a few introductory remarks, and then we will have Dr. Jonathan Chism, Assistant Professor of History, to begin our panel discussion. Thank you again.
Good afternoon, UHD. I'm Chris Hollins, your Harris County Clerk and the Chief Elections Officer of Harris County. To the students, alumni, faculty, staff, and supporters of the University of Houston downtown, I want to extend warm wishes on your fall symposium. And while I'm sad that I can't be there personally, I wanted to share with you how important it is that you make a plan to vote in this year's November election. There is so much on the ballot, from the next president of this country to the next U.S. Senator from Texas, all the way down to races at the local level. And as you know, the further you go down the ballot, the closer you get to your own doorstep. So many important decisions to make that are going to shape our future and our children's future. And so I want to encourage you, starting today, in fact, starting last week, over 600,000 Harris County voters have already made their voices heard, and you can join them from now until Friday, October 30th, and of course on Election Day, November 3rd. There are no lines across Harris County right now, and there are 120 places where you can go and cast your ballot, including 10 drive-through locations. If you want to learn more, go to harrisvotes.com/locations to choose a location near you and see the approximate wait time, which right now is 0. So please, go and vote. Make sure that your friends, your family, and your neighbors cast their ballots too, because this is the most critical election of our lifetimes, and we all need to take part in it. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us to be active, to be informed, and on this occasion, to go out and claim our seat at the table and choose the next generation of leadership for this country. Thank you so much. My colleague Roxanne Werner is there with you, who will be able to answer so many questions and share great information about what we're doing to increase voter access and protect your right to vote. Again, I'm so sad that I couldn't be there with you today, but I'll see you at the polls. Have a good one.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jonathan Chism. I'm an assistant professor of history and a fellow for the Center for Critical Race Studies here at the University of Houston downtown. UHD is a Hispanic and minority-serving institution. This year, our annual fall symposium is on the topic of race, politics, and culture. This symposium focuses on issues related to voting during this important election season, including safely voting during a pandemic, the security of our election process, the suppression of minority voters, the importance of voting, and other topics. I want to welcome our guests who will serve as panelists. Roxanne Werner is the Director of Community Relations and a voting rights advocate. Dr. Ann Benifield is the Vice President of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of Houston. Nata Cornelio is an attorney and a candidate for judge for the 351st District Court. And Tara Taylor is a local community organizer, an activist, and voter engagement consultant. And I also should add a UHD alum. Thank you for all of our panelists being present today. I want to begin with a question for all of our panelists, just so that we can get to know each other. And that first question is, what is one major reason that you became involved in politics? So we'll start here and just work
with the
our way around.
candidate. Criminal justice reform. It's an issue near and dear to my heart, and I have been an attorney for 14 years, fighting inside the system, challenging the system. I was a public defender. I was then a civil rights lawyer, and now I'm running because, frankly, we need judges who have worked with the people who are affected by their decisions, and we need judges who care. We need judges who care and who understand that the system is racist and discriminates based on people's economic circumstances. So every little bit helps, and those decision makers are important. So that's why. Eyes on the prize, I want to make a difference, and I know that those are the seats, those seats make a big difference, amongst other seats, but that's why.
Thank you, thank you.
So I initially got involved in politics really early on in my childhood. I had an 8th grade teacher who had us do a project on the 2004 election, Gore versus Bush, and I really got very interested in politics. And then after the Hanging Chad incident, I realized how interesting politics was. Once I moved to Houston, I became pretty disengaged in politics as I was away from my home in Dallas. And what brought me back was a very contentious Republican primary in 2012. And really some political music that I was listening to from Lupe Fiasco, of all people, who inspired me to take action and start volunteering on presidential campaigns. So from there, it's been 10 years of involvement in this movement of voter engagement.
He's from Chicago.
Yes, he is.
You know, I really don't think of myself as being involved in politics. I feel I'm a political science person. I teach government and politics. And so I like to be the facilitator of actually helping my students to understand the theoretical and the practical aspects. So therefore, working with the League of Women Voter in terms of voter services, trying to integrate the civic engagement component, that's saying how these things matter, being engaged, participating in the political process, and the results of participation and what that means can make all the difference in the world. So that's why I don't see being a government professor and being over voter services for the League as being necessarily politics, because politics oftentimes determine who gets what, where, and how, as Harold Lasswell, a great political scientist, said. So I'm not sure. My determination is to ensure people get to register, to get involved, to participate in the political process. So the government often determines how the distribution of goods and services actually take place, and so that all communities can be served. And that is one of the functions of the League, not only in terms of registering people to get engaged in the process, but also to actually provide fact-based, nonpartisan information so they can utilize this information to be informed and to engage in the political process in an appropriate way.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Werner. I'm with the Harris County Clerk's Office. For a long time for me, I was involved politically in kind of a more activist, grassroots space. I believe that all politics is very, very personal. There's not a political issue that doesn't affect people on a personal level. And so the more I got involved, the more that it really started to show itself that a lot of this access also had to do with the voting booth and who had access to vote. And I realized that here in Harris County, there was so much room for improvement. We're such a big force. We're the third largest county in the nation, and we have so much sway if we could just give our people access to the voting booth, the access they deserve. And so I find myself now at the county clerk's office hoping to fight for that improvement, to give people more access, but also to let people know about that access and make sure that our voters know all the different options, to answer questions about that, and to make sure that the process is as clear as it possibly could be, because we can't make any big changes if people don't have their voices heard. And voting is a very, very key way that people do have that access to have their voice heard.
Thank you, everyone. So next we want to turn to safety at the polls, and I want to direct these questions to Ms. Werner and Dr. Benifield, especially given this pandemic. What safety precautions are being taken at polling locations in Houston and surrounding counties to protect voters' health and safety during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure, I can start with that from our perspective. I mean, there isn't anywhere we go now that doesn't have some kind of new safety precautions, and voting centers are no different. So starting with the election workers, all of our election workers are wearing masks. They're having their temperature taken daily. Every voter who shows up will be offered a mask if they don't have one. We have hand sanitizing stations when you enter and when you leave. And then every voter is also given a finger cover and a sanitizing wipe so that you never actually have to touch the machine if you don't want to. You can use that and then cast your votes and then discard it and then leave. All of our machines are also spaced 6 feet apart so that when you actually go vote in person, you will be 6 feet away from everyone else. And we also have a new form of drive-through voting. So for people who are really uncomfortable with going inside, I've heard a lot of people who are maybe caretakers for someone who is immunocompromised or otherwise disabled. You can actually vote right from your car at 10 different locations in Harris County. So we're taking a lot of different precautions and coming up with a lot of new ways to keep voters safe this year.
Well, the League of Women Voters have been working very closely with the Harris County Clerk's office in terms of trying to get that information out so people can feel secure when they go to polling locations. I have to admit that it seems as if Harris County is on the cutting edge in terms of promoting safety at a level that is not. It's unfortunate that we don't have a mandatory mandate for the voters who come into the polling place that they have to wear masks. That's the unfortunate aspect, because you want to protect the workers. They are required to wear them, but the voters are not required to come in wearing a mask. And that's very unfortunate. You can offer to provide them to them, but they don't have to. So safety is primary, but you need to ensure, we need citizens to be informed in terms of safety, so they will make informed decisions about their own personal health and safety, as well as to protect and secure others. It's not simply about it should be about us as a community, striving to get this pandemic under control and trying to ensure that safety is number one. And voting is part of participating in the political process. This, if anything is evident, this pandemic illustrates that voting definitely matters, and that the decisions that you make between now and November 3rd, during early voting as well as on election day, elections have consequences. And so you will see the result in terms of people making a decision about what they want to be reflective in terms of government. And this is definitely a clear indication that governments that put safety first will actually enjoy some positive attributes from the community in terms of support. You can't protect everybody. You can only offer the opportunity. And I think Harris County and most of the surrounding counties have actually incorporated very safe, secure ways in terms of people to participate in the political process if they want to. So I'm hoping that that will facilitate a great turnout. It already seemed that we're on the trajectory for that to continue to happen, although they did mention 2 counties in Texas, Hidalgo and Cameron County doesn't seem to be having that kind of turnout. Actually, turnout is lower during this early voting time period than it was 4 years ago. So hopefully that will change.
Thank you. I want to build off of what Dr. Benifield said in terms of the importance of voting and talk about voter suppression. As a historian, I'm well aware of the history of disenfranchisement in the South. Poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses. I want to direct this question to Tara Taylor and Nata, Cornelio. What would you tell persons who are reluctant to vote because they feel that their vote doesn't really count?
That's what they want you to think, and that's how they win. I mean, disillusionment is a less violent form of voter suppression, right? And it's a way that people that have sacrificed before us, that have been subject to violence or had to pay a tax to vote, it's a way of taking their voices away again, because then their descendants don't get to vote because they don't think that their voices count. So I used to be a public defender, so I have a lot of experience in redefining winning, redefining value. You don't become a lawyer who defends poor people charged with crimes to get an acquittal every time. That would be great, and there's some success, but really the value is in being the best lawyer that you can be for someone that would not have otherwise gotten that opportunity. I have had clients thank me when I thought they got a terrible sentence, and it was because they said, no one's ever fought for me before. And so I think that what if voting, we don't think about it counting as like literally your vote has to mean that the person you voted for gets elected, but what if it is participation in a movement? And the closer it is to home, the more likely there's a coalition that you can participate in that is building a movement and shifting something. I mean, progress takes, unfortunately, forever, literally. But it's that, right? My city council race lost by, I think it was 14 or 16 votes. I forget the final tally, but a city council person who gets elected, that's 12, 14 votes. So that is you. And then if you think about it, if that person represents you, they come from your community and they make it, once they're a city council person, then they could become mayor, then they could become governor, then they can become president. That's how we get representation. And it's taken a long time, and we're seeing more people of color run for office, and people that are criminal justice reformers, public defenders have not been judges in the past, and so that's why we're running. So these things take time, so I encourage folks to rethink the definition of your vote counting, because it counts if we're part of a movement that is shifting, and maybe we lose a movement here and there, and it motivates a new movement to build, and the next cycle, more people come out and fight for what you hoped your vote would go towards that one time.
Oh, that was beautiful. So I would have to agree, redefine what winning means. For my generation, millennials, I think a lot of what we think winning means is, did we win the presidential election? And over the years, we have been winning. Millennials, our choice. The majority of us have chosen certain people, and they may have been able to win back to back. And now we're coming to a time where the popular vote is not being respected by the Electoral College. The presidential elections are a little bit different than the other elections. So in terms of redefining winning, I would encourage folks my age to think about the people that are closest to you, your city council members, your commissioners, your state reps, your state senators. Federal government is a little more difficult and convoluted to understand, but if you pay attention to what's happening in your immediate community, you will see those wins. We elected 19 Black women judges to the bench 2 years ago. We may have not won the presidential election, but we were able to get some really progressive folks and some people that look like Houston on the bench into these seats. And that is a win, because at the end of the day, those folks will be deciding the things that impact you first and impact you the most. And so there are ways to win. You just have to get involved. When you go and vote in these presidential elections, make sure that you do some research on the folks that are down the ballot. And that's why you're seeing a lot of attention to voting from the top all the way to the bottom. Because if you skip the other races, that's where your vote really matters, is those down ballot races, the local government races. So their vote is important. Just like Nata said, there was a city council race lost by less than 15 votes. And that's an impact. That's somebody from your community. So there's an opportunity there.
All right, so I'm hearing that voting matters at the local, state, and federal levels. I want to build off of this question of voter suppression and look at the technical aspect of voting and consider, are our elections secure? And I want to direct this question to Dr. Benifield and Ms. Warner. Recently, President Trump has warned Americans, especially his supporters, that the election will be rigged and fraudulent. So is our process of voting secure right here in Harris County? Can we trust the voting machines when we cast our vote? How can every registered voter successfully cast their ballot and be confident that when they're going to vote, that their vote will indeed count?
You want to go first?
Sure. I think that any statement at the end of the day that's going to cause voters to wonder if their vote is going to count is in itself voter suppression. This way to disown trust in the system is also voter suppression. Not that we as citizens shouldn't be able to ask, like, hey, what's up with our voting machines? You know, we want to be reassured that our votes count. And in that manner, I can absolutely reassure people. We have plenty of safety measures in terms of any nefarious activity from the outside. Our machines, we are thoroughly checked. Our mail ballot process is secure. There is no reason to believe that your vote will be illegitimized in any way. And I do think that people deserve to know that. But I also think that spreading those ideas and those thoughts is made to do that. It's made to say, oh, okay, well, I don't trust this, or I don't trust the outcome because the votes weren't real, or why should I bother? And so my response to that is your votes are safe. We've gone through extensive processes. The county clerk's office has hundreds of dedicated public servants, and this is what we have been doing nonstop around the clock for months, is making sure that everyone's vote counts. And I also, too, just want to remind anyone who's watching and listening to, to focus on those kind of affirmative actions and those like, hey, like we should be, secure in our voting. We should be ready to do this, because as we repeat things, those rumors become people's perception, and perception is reality. So I've had people ask me, for example, I heard you guys only count the mail votes if a race is really close. Should I even bother voting by mail? And no, who told you that? We count every vote because every vote counts. But it's one of those things that as people repeat it, people believe it because they're like, oh, well, I heard this and it must be true. And of course, when the president says something, you should be able to take that as a reputable source. But unfortunately, there is just no foundation for the accusations of voter fraud. There's no reason for voters to be afraid that the equipment doesn't work. There's no reason for any of that to be a concern for people. And so we want people to feel empowered to vote and like their vote is absolutely going to be counted and it's going to be secure when they cast it.
I echo what Roxanne has said. Since 1788, the first election that we had for President of the United States, we've been doing this for hundreds of years. And for the most part, I can't think of, there are safeguards built into the Constitution in terms of the security of the process. If you don't win, the popular vote and the electoral college vote, people have serious questions about it. They haven't paid very much attention to it to understand the inner working of the popular vote and how they are tied to the electoral college votes or how they are not tied to the electoral college vote. So that's kind of an unfortunate consequence, that because the electorate, people in the public, do not know very much about the governmental process and how it works. That's kind of unfortunate. And for any politician, the President of the United States or anybody else, to use this, and this is not political and this is not partisan, to use it to prey on people's fears because people do not know that much information, that the people are more ill-informed than they are misinformed. But in this particular instance, they are misinformed about the electoral process. And that is so unfortunate, that you can destroy the integrity of the political process in terms of the voting and election. And that's unfortunate that we're undermining our political system and the way it's set up, that voters out there will feel that way. I just think that probably more information, maybe civic needs to be retaught in school in terms of people understanding the importance of civic engagement. I know at our college, Lone Star College, Tomball, we have a civic engagement a committee and we put on programs. And so I hope to tie my students to, in my classroom, I go in and teach, and then I talk about my work with the League of Women Voters in terms of voter services that and we talk about social media and the impact of social media and how people tend to just get caught up in that misinformation campaign, and sometimes it really spirals out of control. It's so unfortunate that from the highest levels of power that we're being told that the system is rigged. No, it's not. Only a few times in history have the president who won the popular vote the candidate who won the popular vote did not get elected president. It's only happened 4 times in our history. And I think we should be cautious of that there's a possibility that could happen, but it's not because the system is rigged. If you want real electoral reform and to get rid of the Electoral College, then you have to work toward a constitutional amendment to do that. And that is massive. So I think people should just pay attention, seek out fact-based information. Don't listen to your friends oftentimes because they don't know any more than you do. Sometimes they don't, honest. I tell my students this constantly. So seek out information from someone you trust. Call the Harris County Clerk's office. Call the Galveston County Clerk's office. Call any of the county offices and find out, about the integrity of the election process. Because it has worked for X number of years, more than 200 years. So I would, why is all of a sudden that it would not work the way it's supposed to? It's set up, and the Constitution has safeguards. If no one wins the majority of the votes in the Electoral College, then it goes into the U.S. House of Representatives, and the president will be selected in that way. So I would not get caught up in what you're hearing people say, and just vote with the idea that you want to participate, you want to select a candidate, and you're going to go with that. I think being informed and being engaged matters, and seek out information. If you want some trustworthy sources, there are trustworthy sources that exist that will be gladly provided for you to get information that you could trust. Unfortunately, often I just hate to think that the people at the highest level of power in the government are not providing trustworthy information to the citizenry. That is so unfortunate.
Thank you, Dr. Benifield. I want to follow up with this question and address this next question to you as well. And this is regarding mail-in voting, the technical details related to that. And we want to first look at the debate regarding this issue of mail-in voting, and why is this such a debatable issue amidst this COVID-19 pandemic. And that question is, recently Governor Abbott issued an executive order limiting counties to 1 absentee ballot drop-off location. So can you explain why Texas is one of 5 states not allowing widespread mail-in voting? What is this all about?
I actually see it. I agree with Natalia, not being political, but this is an effort in terms of voter suppression, because Harris County is a very large county, and this geographical location, and it will disadvantage poor people, elderly people, people of color in lower income communities who do not have access to transportation to get to one location. And so this is an effort, I think, based on the evidence, that is an attempt to suppress the vote for people, low income, poor, the elderly. Because if you think about where that one location is in comparison to how big this county is, a round trip ticket, I teach at Lone Star College in Tomball. Someone driving in from Tomball all the way to NRG and then having to go back there, and they're not accustomed to the traffic flow, and then to actually get a ride if you don't have transportation, this will disadvantage people who already don't have all the means that are required to engage in the political process. When I look at Texas, I said, the demographics are changing. And unfortunately, it's kind of like Machiavelli in The Prince said, by any means necessary. So political power in being elected to office has consequences. And when you lose political power, you lose the ability to be able to distribute and allocate resources. And so people are very determined to maintain the political power they have. And if that means disenfranchising, not uncommon, as Dr. Chris Chism said, in the past, if you look at the history of taking away people's ability to vote and participate in the political process. After Reconstruction, it was less than 20 years when all the black males who had gotten the right to vote after the 15th Amendment, they were basically disenfranchised. If you look systematically at how things work in society, and if you look at how after the Shelby County versus Holden case in 2013, that states automatically start passing legislation, start reducing early voting, voter ID laws. I mean, a groundswell. You only had 8 states that had some ID law, but it wasn't necessarily photo ID. But now we have over 30 plus states have strict voter ID laws or something like that. That this is an effort, and it's under the guise of protecting the integrity of the voting process. But everyone knows what code words are like that, that not to protect the integrity. It has nothing to do with that in the process. It's just eliminating, excluding, and keeping certain people from being able to vote and participate in the political process. And that's an unfortunate aspect. And I still maintain the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, fact-based organizational structure, nonprofit that actually try to make sure that voters have the information that they need. And we provide the voter guide so people will be able to go. And in Harris County, they have Harris County Vote, so you can see what's on your ballot, so you'll know who to vote for and who to make a decision about. So I think, as I said previously, elections have consequences. And this election in 2020 is so important that you need to cast a ballot so you can see the consequences of your action in that process.
Thank you, Dr. Benifield. And part of what I'm hearing that even in 2020, right, 20 years into this millennium, voter suppression is still a problem. It is still happening and occurring. And the mail-in ballots and the debate regarding that is evidence of clear-cut voter suppression. I want to address this next question to Ms. Roxanne. And representing the county clerk's office, how is Harris County endeavoring to challenge potential voter suppression during this pandemic? And that is regarding the mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, in-person voting. What is Harris County trying to do to ensure that everyone that wants to vote can indeed vote, especially people of color?
Yeah, this election, we are absolutely doing everything that we can within the law to give people as much access as possible. And I think what is very important about not just us doing that, but other states, other counties, other areas that are expanding access, it shows what can be done. And if we can do it in Harris County, you can do it in Bexar County, you can do it in Dallas County, you can do it in Tarrant County. And so some of these things are regulated by the governor. Certainly the shutting down of the ballot drop-off locations was regulated, but we do have more ways to vote than we've ever had before. The Clerk Hollins actually asked Greg Abbott to expand early voting. Governor Abbott met that request, and so we have 18 days of early voting, which is more than we previously had. Harris County also has 3 days where we're going to have all polls open until 10 p.m. And then one day on Thursday, October 29th, where polls will open at 7 a.m. and they will stay open until 7 p.m. the next day. And those are for our shift workers, for our doctors, our nurses, and just anyone who might have a non-traditional schedule that needs extra time to vote. So we have more days, we have more hours, we have 120 early voting locations and 800 election day locations. That is triple the amount of early voting locations that we had in 2016. I mentioned earlier that we have drive-through voting. That is something that has never been done here in Texas at all, and it's something that was born kind of out of this pandemic, but is really a great resource for people who do maybe have difficulty going inside but want to vote from their cars. So we have a lot of different ways for people to vote. We also mail ballot applications out to voters who are 65 and older. We did request to do that for the entire 2.4 million registered voters to let the voters decide if they were eligible to vote by mail. And unfortunately, that was something that was dictated by the courts that we couldn't do, but we did get to send those out to all the voters who are over 65. And so it's really about giving people access. I mean, these ways to vote are your right. This is about giving a county that has a population larger than a lot of states as much access as you possibly can, and thinking innovatively and thinking outside the box. And I think it's a really good example too about how we can do so much when you step and take back and go, this is what we've been told we could have, but actually we can have all of these different access. We can have all of these different ways for people to access this system that they have every right to. They deserve to be able to vote easy and conveniently and without fear. And we're hoping to be able to give that to people. So, Annie mentioned this, but if anyone out there hasn't voted yet in Harris County, you can go to harrisvotes.com. You can find a location, you can find a sample ballot, you can find FAQs, because that knowledge is key to that too. And we want people to know that despite these rumors, despite this fear, and voter suppression is real, it is a real problem, but we don't want that to stop anyone from going to the polls. We want people to know that there are barriers and there are hurdles to jump, but we've done as much as we can locally to remove those, and we should all continue together at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level to continue to knock down those barriers and think about what's possible if we give every single person access to the polls. And so we've done a lot of the things that we are able to do within our power to do that, and hopefully we'll come together to continue pushing for that as well.
And just as a side note, I guess Roxanne could better answer this. The talk about for years and years and years, our military service people who are overseas get mail ballots all the time. They actually get to vote. They send them out, the county send them out to them, and they've been doing this. It isn't like all of a sudden today, this year in 2020, is the only time that a person is getting a chance to vote by mail. You might elaborate more on that, but people are acting as if this is the first time in history that people voted by mail. The people in Oregon and California and Washington State have been voting. Some of the Oregon, you vote by mail, period. They have all mail voting. And so this isn't something new. This didn't just occur, so it hasn't been tried, tested, and true. Some states have expanded it because of COVID-19. Because, if you look, people were standing in line in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, in the midst of the spike. The highest numbers. They were a judge ruled that they had to stand in line and vote. That's the only way they could vote. And so I'm thinking that voters should be able to see this, be able to know the truth based on information that's being provided, and that this is a legitimate means in which to actively engage and get more people to participate. Because in states where they have this, the voter turnout is really high.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think you look at other locations and we should demand better. Mail ballot is not some mystery thing that we just invented yesterday. And there's a lot of things that goes for too. Other states have same-day voter registration. In Texas, you have to be registered to vote 30 days before an election. If another state can manage same-day voter registration, why can't Texas? Texas also has a pretty strict voter ID law, but not everywhere has that. And so I think when you look around at what's possible at places giving people the most access, we as Texans should absolutely be like, wait a second, why are these laws being unfairly imposed on us? What is the purpose of these? Other places are able to do this and still securely have their citizens vote. And here we're really making people jump over hurdles through rings of fire just to get to a ballot box, and it's not fair.
Thank you. I appreciate your responses to those questions. I want to shift gears and talk about becoming informed. And I'm going to address Dr. Benifield again to get us started with this question, but also invite some of our other panelists to respond as well. But first, how might voters know in advance what will specifically be on their ballot, including various candidates and propositions, right? With the League of Women's Voters, when I have voted, I have personally went to their website to do some research.
Well, good.
So yeah, I appreciate what your organization does.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters, in terms of the Voters Guide, it's definitely a labor of love in the midst of COVID and all of that. We've worked very hard. And one of the things, the expansion of the electorate to underrepresented, underserved groups has been our focus. Last year was the first time the League of Women Voters actually published the Voters Guide in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. And we actually have it online in the digital platform in all of those languages. We only printed the English guide this time in part because of COVID. And many of our distribution points were actually closed down, like community centers and libraries. But now the libraries actually have them, and you could do curbside pickup. But in the Voters Guide, we didn't include the proposition because there are local school issues sometimes in terms of bond issues, drainage, mud district things. So it's best to go to your county website to find that out, because they will definitely be at harrisvote.com and say what's on your ballot. But Vote 411 will give you fact-based information about the candidates. If you happen to see that a candidate, nothing is listed by that candidate's name, that's because that candidate did not respond, in spite of the many times that we reached out by phone and by email trying to get them to submit their information in that particular forum. But there's a mechanism in vote411.org that you could do a comparison of the candidates. You pull them up, look at their biographical information, and you can compare the candidates on the issues. We've asked them questions. We give them an opportunity to respond in their own words. We don't change their words or anything. So if you see some misspelling, it wasn't the league's fault. Let me tell you, we didn't do it. They did it. We want to put it in the Voters Guide in exact verbatim, exactly as they stated it. So fact-based, nonpartisan information affords you with an opportunity to actually look at the information, look at the candidates, compare the candidates, and choose the one that you feel most represent the issues that you're interested in. Because you can't, Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. You can't continuously vote for candidates who are not representing your interest and think you're going to get some wonderful result. You need to look at the issues. You need to spend some time. I strongly recommend you make a plan, and I know we're in the midst of early voting. Make a plan, check your voter registration at votetexas.gov to see if you're registered to vote. It will actually tell you whether you're registered. The second thing that you need to do is check the ID. Go see what ID is required if you're not sure about the identification that you have in terms of, so you can be sure that you have what you need when you go to the poll. And then go look at the ballot, find your polling place, construct a ballot. At Vote 411, you can construct your ballot, you can print it out. If you don't have a printer, I suggest you write it down, because you can take in the Voter's Guide, or you can take in a piece of paper, but you cannot take your electronic device. You cannot take your iPad, your phone, or any electronic device into the polling place. So that's not part of the necessary discrimination part. They're just simply trying to maintain the integrity of the voting system. And take it, and then invite some of your friends to go with you in terms of, that's the part I suggest that you make a plan in terms of inviting your friends. Find out what your polling location is, and it's pretty sophisticated at Harris Vote. You can do all these things and find out how long the wait is and all of that. I mean, voting has never been, in this particular aspect, easier. And you've never had this much information at your fingertip. And I know, unfortunately, some places like the libraries are closed and you can't go inside to access them. But many people have cell phone, and so it's a computer in itself, and you can access all this information right on your cell phone.
All right, and we're going to build on that discussion and shift to culture, popular culture. In recent weeks, we've seen everyone from Real Housewives to Ice Cube begin to use their platform to talk about politics. What do you make of celebrities and entertainers putting in their 2 cents? And And I'll direct this to the panelists on my right.
So as I was saying before, what inspired me to actually take action in politics was a rapper. I had already had the civic engagement part down thanks to public schools in Dallas County, but I was not familiar with Houston and its politics and really was disillusioned by things that were going on at the federal level. We already had a president that I liked. He was probably going to win again. That's what I thought at the time until I kind of saw what was happening on the other side. And that inspired me to kind of watch. But for me to take action took someone who spoke my language. And a lot of the times, especially with millennials, celebrities, memes, social media, those are the only folks that are getting the message to us. Campaigns typically do not reach out to young voters because we don't vote on a consistent basis. And when you remove the engagement that campaigns give to voters, we don't even know what's happening. We don't know the issues. We don't know that voting is happening. We're not seeing the signs lined up at the polling locations. We need to hear those things from popular culture, from the mediums that we participate in. That doesn't mean that every celebrity or every piece of information is factual. So we have to, one, realize that celebrities are people. They are not a monolith. Just because they're a certain color or they participate in certain things doesn't mean that they have the same ideology. We have Kanye West, we have Ice Cube, we have people that work on different sides of the aisle. And they are using their platforms to talk to both sides. I know a lot of people are upset with Ice Cube. I think that he's stacking the deck, and he's talking to people who are willing to engage. If one campaign is not receptive, then we go to the other. And we just try to make sure that both candidates are aligned with what is needed in the communities, because somebody's going to win. And their platform is important. We've seen a lot more sports ball players who are speaking out for Black Lives Matter or police brutality. Those things are important because when you surround voters with information, access to information, they become intrigued and they begin to seek out the information instead of it being forced on them. And that's how you get people to engage in the political system. When you give them issues and you have them work backwards as to who can solve those issues and what can solve those issues, they'll seek out the information to vote.
I think that answer was perfect. It's hard to top that, but I am grateful. So I'm a candidate now, and I've had to use social media, especially since the pandemic started. There's no other way to communicate with the people. And one of the strategies is, you know what? Actually, a lot of people don't know when voting is, right? Like, let me retweet the county clerk's wonderful platform about the dates and the times and the locations. And let me repost some of Jolt's actions, images that empower, young people of color to get out and vote, so that everybody that's following what I'm doing and curious about my campaign knows when they can do it, how to execute. We learn in organizing, you have to make an ask at the end, and the ask is vote. But, we have to provide people with the information. It has to be easy to find, just like voting has to be easy. All the information surrounding it has to be accessible. And, I'm glad celebrities and sports folks are spreading the word that it's on TV everywhere. It's cool. Voting is cool. Let's own that.
Yeah, and one thing I also wanted to point out is that corporations are getting involved in this too. That's typically when you see a lot more engagement from young folks. We have Facebook that has taken a lot of interest in the vote. They are forcing us to look and see if we are registered. They are forcing us to look and see where our voting locations are. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, these notifications are popping up because that is where we consume information. We have MTV that's telling us, hey, this is on the ballot. Your future is on the ballot. This is where you need to go to find out if you're registered and where to find voting information. So when you surround voters with the information, like I said, and the mediums that they trust are also participating in it, it seems less ominous. And it seems like it's something more important. So access to the information is paramount. And when you remove access or refuse to talk to certain groups, it is voter suppression. So I think this election, we're seeing a high turnout because different groups are participating in the turnout messaging.
Thank you, thank you. And I want to follow up with a question regarding social media. And you mentioned that a lot of young people are indeed on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and seeing political ads and messaging. Perhaps I invite anyone that is willing or able to address this to just comment on verifying the messages that you see on social media, because of course it has been used as a tool of manipulation to disseminate false news or fake news. How do we begin to verify or encourage some young persons that really use social media to get information to verify that news from other reputable sources as well?
Yeah, I mean, there is not something that's a huge mystery to it. A lot of it is just double check it. You know, if you see something on Twitter or on Facebook and you think that is outrageous, Google it. And if you can't find another source, or if the source that you find it from is a blog post that doesn't have any links to legitimate news sources, it's not real. Or if it's something, a thing that I see a lot that's almost like a little red flag in my mind is if you see a post that said, my friend said XYZ happened, maybe second guess it, because it may have happened, but also there's a game of telephone there, and something that maybe happened in another state or another area is completely different context than something that's happening here. And then I know a lot of the platforms are cracking down more on political ads. Twitter actually isn't allowing any right now. Facebook is a little bit more particular about theirs, but I think still allowing a lot of stuff. And in this day and age too, with technology, there is video manipulation, there is audio manipulation. So if you again see a video or hear something and you think that is crazy, it might be crazy. It's entirely possible. It is 2020. But you can also go and try to find that full video, because that is the thing too, is if I see a quote pulled from a politician and I think, that doesn't really sound like them. You go and you watch the full video and you maybe add context, and maybe that is, sometimes it's exactly what you thought it would be. And sometimes, it is like, oh, that's very different when you hear the whole speech. So I think in this day and age in particular, we're very used to just bite-sized content. I saw this in a tweet, it must be true. But a lot of these things are gonna take a little bit of extra research. And especially when you come to elections, there are different types. So there's just kind of that almost, the non-verified, it's just happening information swirling out there. And then you have candidates and campaigns, which are good firsthand sources for platforms, for learning more about a candidate, and that kind of thing. And then you do have your local government websites. You have nonpartisan websites like vote411.org, and you can kind of check all of those things together and help yourself understand a fuller picture of what's going on. And then it also helps with things like the dates of early voting or the times, like those kinds of things you can find at a reputable source. Like we mentioned, our website is harrisvotes.com, but every local county has a site where they're going to list the polling locations, they're going to list the times, that sort of thing. And so I think there is a lot of weeding through things that maybe are half true or out of context. But right now it's and going forward too, it's a duty that all of us have to do a little bit of homework when we see something and maybe not just take everything for face value. Just like when you remove social media, if your friend told you something happened and it was crazy or it sounded outrageous, you would probably get on your phone or get on your computer and try to find a headline or a video or something to back that up. And if you couldn't find anything, you'd go, I think maybe there was a misunderstanding. Like, you told me this, but I don't know if it's 100% true. And I think we kind of need to take everything with a little bit of grain of salt and take it on ourselves to do a little bit more homework too when we see things.
Absolutely. Thank you. I want to shift to volunteering and service. And I appreciate all of you all for your service on this panel, your involvement in politics, your contribution. What are ways persons can volunteer and serve during and beyond this election season to bolster our democratic process? So what are avenues for getting involved during the election if people want to get involved to help, and even after the election is finished?
You could do it from the comfort of your own home. There's a lot of really good organizations to partner with that are right now focused on getting out the vote. I mentioned Jolt Action. They're a great organization trying to highlight issues relevant to young Latinx people. Texas Organizing Project is a local group. Pretty much any group that does justice work and outreach right now, you can get on a text bank with them, you can phone bank for them. Some folks are walking to homes and safely dropping literature, right, without making contact. Unfortunately, there are a lot of restrictions right now. And I think, making sure our homes are in order, go to the 411 website and fill out your ballot and text some friends and family members and help them through that process and help them figure out a plan if you have some time too, because if all of us did that, we'd be in really good shape.
Yeah, so that was kind of my story, was just getting involved and then never getting uninvolved. But I think between elections, you need to figure out what your biggest issues are and figure out who is responsible for changing it, who could you replace that person with if they're not willing to change it, and get a plan to help that person during election season, or become an activist for those issues and make sure that they're top of mind during the election. A lot of things that we do in between elections is to make sure they're hot button issues during the election, because that inspires people to vote for certain people and to vote in general. Thanks to the University of Houston, I was able to become a White House intern in 2014, the University of Houston downtown, actually, and SGA. And so I was able to see how the federal government works with the public in between the elections. Now, during election time, there's several ways that you can volunteer your time or get paid to work. I highly recommend that you work if you need a job. But what you want to do is to find a candidate that is inspiring to you, that is talking about those issues that you've been caring about and thinking about in between the elections, and help them get where they need to go. If there's somebody in your community that has been down for your issues and for your community and your people, inspire them to run for office. That alone is a very big step for your community, just to have someone on the ballot that's willing to put their life on hold and to give their life to service and their community. There's bigger ways to volunteer, like volunteer on the campaigns and volunteering for the organizations that are pushing for issues and candidates that are willing to change those issues. But really what it comes down to is relational organizing, where you're just talking to your friends like, hey, dude, did you vote? Oh, you're not gonna vote? Do you know where to vote? What's your plan? When are you gonna vote? That is probably the best thing that you can do during this time. Do you know when and where you're gonna vote? I live with somebody who was an infrequent voter, and just simply asking that question inspired him to go to harrisvotes.com, look at his sample ballot, look up the people that were in races that he cared about, and actually go cast a ballot. Because half the problem is not knowing what's going on and not knowing how, and it being inconvenient to cast a vote. Right now we have the most convenient voting process probably in the state of Texas, and there's just no excuses this time. And we need to have those conversations with our friends and our family about there is no excuse. You know what side you stand on. You need to go cast your ballot today.
We also, I know we think of election season as like a thing, but the fun part is that there's always elections. I've been with the county clerk's office for just under 2 years, and I think this is my 7th or 8th election. We have them all the time, but the beauty in that is we always need election workers. Ahead of this election, we put out a big call for election workers. A lot of national organizations like Power the Polls put out a call, and Houston stepped up. We had almost 40,000 applications for poll workers, which is something we've just never seen before. We also hire high school students as young as 16. They are wonderful help with technology, and all of our election workers get paid $17 an hour. They get training, and it's the only way our elections run. We have had in the past to shut polling locations down because we couldn't find people to work. It's something that this election, again, Harris County has no problem with, but other places are having a problem with. And so I think when the dust settles here and people want kind of to hold that fire, becoming a regular election worker is a way to do that. A lot of our election workers, are retired, which is wonderful because they do have the time to do it, and they've been doing it for a long time. But it's also wonderful to have people who look like the communities that they serve. When you go there and the person checking you in is a young person or a person of color or a member of the LGBTQ community, you see yourself represented there, and I think that's really important. And then you also see a side of elections and voting rights that you never knew. I mean, there's a whole iceberg of things that you don't really know until you see it in that different capacity. And so I know we have a lot of people that applied this time and maybe won't work this election, but I absolutely hope people will hold on to that, because we will need people probably for a December runoff. We will need people in 2021, in 2022. Every year we have a lot of elections. We have runoffs, we have local elections. We have all of these elections, and they always need people to work. So in addition to getting paid, you get to save democracy, you get to learn a lot, and you get to be a part of this, really big thing that we all need to make happen. And so I definitely would also encourage people to be an election worker. If only on election day you get, it's one day of your time. It's a long day, but it's a really worthwhile thing to do. So I really applaud everyone who stepped up this election, and I want to keep it going. So I definitely have to plug becoming an election worker.
In conjunction with what Roxanne just said, that it gives you a civic engagement opportunity. For high school students, they actually get permission from school to not be at school, and it can be used in a college application when applying for college. They say I was civically engaged. So
we give them a letter of recommendation from the clerk. It's an excused absence, and you get paid to miss school. If you know a high schooler, it's a great deal.
You can't beat that. So I would say, in terms of redirecting the focus, I know we're coming near the end anyway, but one of the things that's after this election is over, as I said, elections have consequences. The census is happening or been put on hold in terms of the count for right now. The court gave permission to do that. But the counting and the redistricting and the reapportionment effort will be central and key, very key, to the state of Texas in next year, because the state legislature will be responsible for redrawing the district lines for the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as for the state Senate and the State House of Representatives. And that matters. So undercounting populations can have an impact in terms of how you draw the line. And if the Supreme Court, depending on how they rule in that case that's coming up before them, because the Commerce Department is suggesting they want to submit 2 different numbers, one with only citizens, and I'm not sure how they're going to do that since there wasn't a citizenship question on the census, and one for people who weren't citizens, and that states would therefore use only those numbers to draw district line, so that would underrepresent. And that has consequences in terms of money in local communities, in terms of dollars. We're talking about close to almost $2 trillion that the federal government put money back into states. And so if you have an undercounted population, then you're not getting the money for your state based on your population. And therefore, that's a disadvantage in terms of the state being able to accomplish the goals and objectives of that particular community. So the redistricting process and the state legislature drawing those lines is going to be very important. And so people are preparing to have study and advocacy group to prepare people to go before the state legislature and give testimony. So this is very important, because once the state legislature draw the district lines, it's in effect for the next 10 years. And so that means your community could be underrepresented for 10 years. And so you want to make sure that difference in the population is accurately counted, reflected, and the reapportionment that take place, because there's been some speculation that Texas could possibly get up to 3, maybe 4 seats as a result of population count, because the population has grown tremendously from 2010 to now. And every 10 years, the U.S. Constitution mandate that you will count the population. So that's the next big issue. People can become involved. They can travel. They can write letters. They can email. They can tweet. If you want to use social media for good, I tell my students that in class, pull out your cell phone and find this information. Let's use it for good as opposed to the other reasons that you use it for. And let's tweet about it. Let's do Instagram. Let's do Snapchat and talk about counting, what this means in terms of the count, representation, what this means in terms of money back to the local community. All of these things matter. And the league has many opportunities for people to volunteer, to actually get involved in activities. We do voter registration. The election is over, but we're still doing voter registration, because this is not the only election. We want everyone who's eligible to vote to actually register so they can vote, so they can participate in the political process. So we continuously do this the whole time. So get involved and volunteer with a civic organization. There are plenty of civic organizations who are actually engaged in helping people in other ways. And even if you don't get paid, civic engagement or volunteer opportunities look very good on your application and look good on employers. When employers are trying to hire you, they want to see you are interested in something. And that would be an indicative of that. So get out, get involved, and let's keep this democracy going.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One final question as we wrap up. And this question takes us to the issue of race. As noted at the start of the panel session, UHD is a historically predominantly Spanish serving institution, as well as minority serving institution. And the question that I want to ask is, considering that our students and stakeholders are primarily Black and brown people, what's one thing they should keep in mind heading into this election and afterwards? I know that's a juicy question, but what's one thing, given our student demographics as Black and brown people, that they may want to keep in mind? And feel free, anyone can jump in.
I would say your vote matters. It has consequences. Elections have consequences. And who actually win gets the distribution of goods and services. Like I said, Harry Laswell, the political scientist, say politics is who get what, where, who gets what, when, and how. And so the allocation of resources is very much. And so if your community is not voting and participating in the political process, that means you're an underserved community. You're not getting the response back from elected leaders if you're not participating. If you participate in the political process, leaders are more likely to respond to your particular community. And if you turn out in numbers, you can have an impact on the outcome of this electoral process. So I suggest that the Hispanic community is primarily referred to in political science literature as the sleeping giants, that because they're a younger population group, they tend to be less engaged. But let's make this election different. Let's be engaged. Let's vote. Make your vote count, go out, participate in the political process in numbers that have been unheard of, and it'll change the dynamics of things. Because actually they're the second largest population group, Hispanics in the state of Texas. Anglos are the largest, but they are not the majority. So Black and brown people actually in the state of Texas make up the majority of the population. That matters in terms of deciding who's get elected to office, who gets to make the decisions, who get to make the rules, and who gets to decide in terms of the criminal justice reform issue that she's talking about. The people who are in power get to make those decisions. The judges, the district attorneys, the people down ballot, the state legislatures get to make the laws. So voting and participating matters in that respect. So pay close attention to those things. That's what I would say.
And I think I'll build on that, which is to say, in addition to your vote matters, representation matters. You know, there are 38 courts in Harris County between district and county. You're like but they do criminal justice. And of those 38 courts, there are 0 Latinas serving on those courts. And there is a 43 to 45% Latinx population in Harris County. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to run. And when I talk about it, especially to my people, I remind them that it was Mexican American and Latino lawyer groups that like caused Mexicans to even be recognized as a group of people who were being discriminated against from being on juries, right? But it was like we didn't exist in the law until we fought for it. And I don't think it has to be that way, but it's important when people, to know that people have paved the way, like our people have paved the way to us to show other people what our experience is. And the more representation that there is, the more of an understanding that there will be about what the needs of the communities are across the boards. There's intersectionalities. I mean, in our justice system, not having Latinx people on the courts, we don't have good data about Latinx people in the criminal justice system. We don't, because in a lot of cases with a lot of law enforcement agencies, they're classified as white. We have immigration consequences that affect so many of our brown community or relatives, you know, and people in the system that know nothing about it. We have language barriers without an appreciation for what it means to have a court proceeding and not understand really what is being said, or not have a judge understand what you're saying. So this is why representation matters, right? It's a specific thing, but it's intersectional, and that's what I'll say to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll speak to the Black community on this one. One is to find out what you care about. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I don't care about this election, so-and-so is gonna win or lose anyway. That's not necessarily true. Figure out what your issue is. Let's just say it's marijuana reform, or it's, you know, you have a cousin that's in jail. Do you realize that you get to vote for the judges that put people in jail? There is something on the ballot for you to vote for. Doesn't matter who you vote for whoever you want, just go do it. They wouldn't be trying to take it away from you if it was useless and worthless. Black women were the last group of women able to vote in this country. So if you are a Black woman, you have to not only encourage yourself to vote, but your entire family. What we do well is take care of each other. And that means we have to take care of each other at the ballot box. If you feel like you don't have anything to vote for somebody else who can't vote. Vote for that undocumented person. Vote for that person that's still on papers with a felony who can't vote. Find a reason and go do it.
I always want to say again that, you know, Houston and Harris County, like, we're a powerhouse. We have a population the size of the state of Colorado. When you write off your vote, it is not something that you should just throw away, because we can and should be heard. And also, when you vote, voting is a necessary part of having your voice heard and being civically engaged, but it does not end at the ballot box. Once you vote these elected officials into office, you can always call up your state representative, ask them for a meeting, email them and tell them your thoughts on things, call up your city council representative and tell them what issues you want to see change on. When they vote on a bill in Congress that you disagree with, you can call their offices and say, hi, I'm a constituent and I would like to see some change. You have this voice that is relevant and it is powerful in the streets, in the ballot box, and in the halls of the people who are making these decisions for you. And we should never forget that.
Thank you so much. I am so fired up. I appreciate each of you all for your participation on this panel, for sharing your wisdom, your insight. Election day is Tuesday, November the 3rd, 2020. Early voting has already begun and ends Friday, October the 30th. On behalf of the Center for Critical Race Studies, I want to encourage everyone to exercise your right to vote. Thank you.